Welcome to Hyphens Haven, the space for multi-hyphenate artists working on stage and off in front of the camera and behind the scenes. We share our paths to becoming who we are. The spotlight for today is on a four-time Emmy award-winning composer and multi-instrumental performer. He has scored dozens of feature films, theater and dance productions, as well as TV programs. Additionally, he has produced music for a number of rock, jazz, and world music CD releases, and his live performances collaborating with celebrated artists have enchanted audiences from around the globe. His resume includes over 50 titles on his resume, and his current project is now playing on Max called Tom and Jerry Snowman's Lead. So I am so excited to introduce this fellow Yellow Jacket, as we are both rambling wrecks from Georgia Tech, Vivek Maddala. How are you doing, Vivek?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am awesome. So to get the audience to know who you are, we always start with the foundation that you're raised on. So share with us who your parents are, what are their names and professions, and where you're from.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was born in Rochester, New York, upstate. But I grew up mostly in Gainesville, Florida. And my dad was a university professor. He was a mathematician, economist. Econometrics was his field. And my parents are from India, and it's kind of interesting. I'm gonna say something that may be painting broad brushstrokes here, but what I've observed in the kind of the Indian diaspora is that there's a kind of an unspoken set of assumptions, kind of almost like cultural assumptions, that if you're a serious person, you study math and science, maybe you go to medical school or engineering school. Not that it's somehow scandalous or shameful to go into the arts, but it's just there's kind of unspoken assumption that if you're a serious person, you study math and science, and the arts are nice. It might be something to do as a hobby, but you know, that's not, it's just not appropriate. And my parents never actually said this to me, but when you kind of grow up in a particular environment, you sort of internalize a lot of the ideas that are just floating around, a lot of the assumptions that maybe haven't really been examined or interrogated. And you grow up sort of marinating in these assumptions, and you sort of internalize them. And so I always wanted to be a musician since I was a little kid. Like, just I was always hearing music in my head. I would hear melodies, and I would constantly tapping out rhythms, and but I didn't really have a model for what does it even look like to go into the arts. So when I was 15, I went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. I'm primarily a drummer. I was studying to be a jazz drummer. And if you think about like what was happening in the early 90s, with the proliferation of drum machines, if you were not like world-class amazing drummer, probably it didn't bode well. And I was a pretty competent drummer, but I realized that my main strengths were in writing and producing, and I had a good background in math and physics. When I was 16, I ended up going to engineering school, and I went to Georgia Tech. I studied electrical engineering and economics undergrad, and eventually, I went to graduate school to study electrical engineering and applied physics, and I was working as an engineer. And all the time that I was doing that, I enjoyed it, and I was, pretty good at it. But the entire time I wanted to be making music. I always felt like that's what I really should be doing, and I wanted to do it, but it was kind of just always something I almost kind of like suppressed, because that's not what a serious person does. That's something that it's, that you do on the side. So I ended up going in a very circuitous route to find my way eventually back into music. Um, and I don't necessarily recommend other people follow my circuitous route because it's not an efficient way to get what you want. Um, but that was sort of my path. Um, I'm not sure if I'm really even answering your question, or maybe I've gone off on
You
a tangent.
you're setting up the story
Okay.
because to speak of thinking of your parents and saying I see their faces, I know their values, and yet something soulful is calling to me. It's a spirit that's saying this is your path, even though your parents may feel that a different journey should be for their son. And
Yeah.
as we're thinking of your journey, let's even go back to elementary school because you
Yeah.
spoke of getting ready to go to engineering, and yes, we studied engineering together. Well, not together, but I also was a
Yeah.
computer engineering at Georgia Tech. But going back to
Yeah.
elementary school, let's start there. Was there a teacher in elementary school that may have saw something in you and wanted to nurture the talent that was presented in class?
I had a really good fifth grade teacher who her name was Mrs. Wadley. I have no idea maybe she's still teaching. I don't know. Um, and she was quite unusual. I think she was from Chicago. She had this like Chicago accent. She talked like this. But she was a fantastic teacher and great math teacher. But also like I think I became really interested in history and in culture and in social sciences through her because she really invited students to question orthodox ways of looking at history. So like, whatever you read in your history textbook that like Christopher Columbus was a great guy. And she was like, well, let's look at it critically from a variety of different angles. For example, let's look at it from the perspective of the indigenous people here who were basically subjected to a genocide as a result of his, anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But like to actually question prevailing assumptions. This is something that I feel like I've been doing my entire life, probably as a result of her influence. Um, and critical thinking. I feel like there's just a lot that she was very, and she was a hard teacher, um, and sometimes a little intimidating, but she was just a great teacher. So like in terms of my elementary school years, that probably um, she's probably the really standout teacher. And one thing I remember is I didn't miss a single day of school that year, and I think partly because I didn't want to. Um, and again, she was not an easy teacher. She was challenging. She was hard. But there was something exciting about how she presented material, and again, sort of inviting the students to bring themselves to the material and take from it what resonates. And again, like critical thinking and challenge prevailing assumptions, and you know challenge what you read in the textbooks, like because the textbooks are coming from a particular lens. um so yeah.
And hearing this answer and knowing about the conversation we had off camera, to
Uh-huh.
know that with your work as a composer, because you're so good at what you do, it's kind of reflected in that foundation that this fifth grade teacher gave for you to explore different sides, which kind of has helped you even as an adult explore different sides to see how you can represent that musically. So kudos to her for challenging you as a fifth grader and being so stern that one, you respected her, and two, you didn't want to miss out on anything she had to present. So we always
Yeah.
want to give kudos to our teachers because they help lay our foundation. And thinking about beyond elementary school, was there another teacher or even a moment in middle school or even high school that started to really help you grow into this young artist as well as mathematician because you have both sides of your brain that's working?
Um, yeah, there are probably too many examples to give here, but um, I have to say, school is hard, and it was hard. It was never easy for me. Um, school's hard. Maybe that's a cliche, but like, um, it's um, of course, there's the whole like social component, and that can make things that can add additional dimensions of difficulty. But even just the material, I had some really good teachers and some not great teachers, and a whole range. And I think that probably this what I'm describing is a common experience for a lot of people. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that you sort of figure out how to navigate those waters, when you don't have a great teacher, but you have to learn the material, and you sort of learn how to learn yourself. And there are other teachers that are like inspiring and exciting, and there's a whole range. So um yeah, I have a lot of a lot of different examples I could probably give you, but maybe maybe they're not so interesting to other people other than me. I don't know.
It's okay. Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What influenced your decision to go to a school like Georgia Tech? Knowing that you have art in your soul, but yet you are choosing electrical engineering.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, um it was probably the best engineering school that I was able to get into. Um there was other, like, I was really interested in the University of Chicago also, but they don't actually have an engineering program. They have a physics program, so I would have ended up probably studying physics. Um One of the things that I was specifically interested in is, um so okay, if you're a composer or a musician in general today, um it really helps to have technical skills, because you have to wear a lot of different hats today in a way that maybe wasn't the case 30, 40, 50 years ago, um, because of the way the profession has evolved. It helps if you understand how to record, if you understand equipment and signal path and gain staging and phase relationships. There's all kinds of technical things that help in the creation of music. And I recognized this when I was in high school. Um, I was a big fan of the rock band Boston, and the band Boston was founded by this MIT guy, an engineer from MIT, who was able to combine his engineering skills with his musical ideas and create some really compelling music. And that sort of formed a model for me. So I studied, originally, I was thinking about going to mechanical engineering because I was interested in electroacoustics. And I ended up meeting with William Marshall Leach, who was in the double E department at the time. He's since passed away, but he was one of the world's leading figures in audio engineering, in electromagnetics and electroacoustics. Dr. Petronas in the physics department, likewise at Georgia Tech. So it was actually after meeting with Dr. Leach in the double E department that he convinced me to change my major from mechanical, which prior to matriculating, but I originally applied in mechanical engineering and I switched to electrical. Um, he gave me a tour of his laboratory and was showing me how he builds audio amplifiers, and gave me audio demonstrations of like why does the music sound better on this system than that system, and like, in terms of just not just even critical listening, but also how do you measure these signals. And that's when I realized that, okay, if I'm going to study engineering, this may be as close to music as I can get without actually being a music major. So I was interested in building and designing guitar pedals to, like, you know help me get the guitar tone that I was hearing in my head. um I was interested in, how do you record a snare drum to get a particular kind of sound, again, a sound that I was hearing in my head. And that involves physics, that involves understanding how sound waves propagate, understanding phase relationships, superposition, there, all these concepts that go back to engineering. So I studied engineering, weirdly enough, because it was as close to music as I could get without being a music major. Now, I did also play in the jazz band at Georgia Tech, and you know, um, I've been a jazz head since I was probably 14, 15, and so it kind of made sense for a variety of reasons to go to Georgia Tech, um, for all the aforementioned reasons. Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, now there is a music engineering type of
I know if that had existed, um, yeah, if that had that existed, 20 years ago, I would have totally done that.
That's cool. So, as you explore Georgia Tech as this engineering major and playing in the jazz band, because Georgia Tech settled in the heart of Atlanta is just a cool place to grow as a student, as a young musician. Were you able to take
Yeah.
part in out outside of campus activities and playing
Yeah,
instruments?
I did, somewhat, not as much as I should have. Part of it was, I was also quite young.
Yeah, that's right. You were 16, 17.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I was 21 upon graduation. So like, I remember, at one point, so I lived on campus for 3 years. For the fourth year, I actually moved off campus, was living in an apartment. My next door neighbor was this percussionist who I became very good friends with, and I didn't know this at first, but at one point I was in his apartment, and I saw that he had like all these pictures of James Brown, and he James Brown records. I was like, oh, this guy's a big James Brown fan. That's cool. And I was looking around at some of these pictures, and I was like, hey, there's James Brown, and there's you. And I realized, and he never told me he was James Brown's percussionist. And like he just never mentioned it, I guess because it wasn't relevant. But I was like, wait a minute, you never told me this? How did this, and he had previously played with the SOS band. Anyway, so he started inviting me to stuff, but all the stuff required you to be 21 to get in. And at one point, like there was a recording academy event, and he invited me down. It was at a club in Buckhead, and the bouncer wouldn't let me in. And so, to answer your question, yes, I did play out, and I did meet other musicians. A combination of the fact that I was too young to get into stuff and didn't have a fake ID. I just didn't have it together to be able to do that. I should have. And also the fact that engineering school is hard, and I was mostly just staying on campus studying, because if I didn't, I was going to fail. um, I did not make as much use of Atlanta as I should have in retrospect, especially if you think about like in the 90s, there was so much great music coming out. I mean, still today, but there was so much great stuff coming out of Atlanta. Um, some of my favorite bands at the time were coming out of Atlanta. There was um uh, a really interesting intersection of R&B and hip hop that was coming out of Atlanta at the time. This is sort of pre-crunk period. There was all kinds of really cool stuff that was going on, that I should have taken more advantage of. I did take some drums lessons from Sonny Emery, who's a fantastic drummer. He plays with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and he's based in Atlanta. Mind-blowingly amazing drummer. In fact, the first time he sat at my drum kit, I had like a sort of a student model Pearl export series. He sat down at my drum kit and started playing this sort of Afro-Cuban groove, and I was like, that just didn't sound like my kit. It didn't sound like a different instrument, which kind of tells you like, it doesn't matter what this guy's playing, it's going to sound amazing. But yeah, in retrospect, I think I probably should. There were a lot more opportunities for me to explore music that I just didn't take advantage of, and something I regret. But you can't really rewind the clock and do it again. You can't rewind the tape and play it
Right.
again. So,
Yeah, keep going. But here
yeah,
you are still. I mean,
yeah,
what you're meant to do will find its way to you. So
yeah.
no worries on that. But as you and I remember being in the ECE building and studying, and it is hard being an engineering major at Georgia Tech. That is all true. But you found your way out. We don't say we graduated. We say we got out.
Yeah.
So finding your way out, you got out. What was the next step for you?
So, okay, so I took a job with Tektronix in Portland, Oregon. Portland is kind of a hip town for music. Like the band Pink Martinis there. One of my biggest influences, Gino Vanelli, is based in Portland. They have a fantastic symphony. I got a job with Tektronix as an electronics design engineer. Um, and there were specific reasons. One, it's a great company, it's a great job, and I um, had access to all this test equipment because I was again interested in designing and building audio gear and putting together a studio. And so I had access to like millions of dollars of gear that I would not have otherwise had access to. At the same time, so then I also um, started taking engineering classes at towards a master's degree at the University of Washington in Seattle. At the same time that the company was willing to pay for, which was great. They paid for my tuition and books and everything. And I met Gino Vanelli, and I started doing some work with him in his studio, and that's how I learned a lot about how to mic up instruments and how to do MIDI sequencing and orchestration. Um, and I played in some bands there. Eventually, I then got um, a job offer at. Oh, sorry. Okay, there's an interesting little detour. So I mentioned the rock band Boston earlier in our conversation. So when I was 23, I got a call to join up with the band Boston for the Greatest Hits album and a US tour. Um, and so I took a sabbatical from Tektronix, moved to Boston for the pre-production rehearsals and to go on tour with Boston. After that, I decided, okay, what I want to do is go back into music. So I ended up taking a job at Dolby Laboratories in San Francisco, where I was developing audio technologies for cinema applications. So again, a little closer to music and film scoring, which is really what I wanted to be doing. And then in 2000, there was a national competition for film scoring that was co-sponsored by Guitar Center and Turner Classic Movies, Warner Brothers. Anyway, so the idea is that you go to their website, you download these film clips, you score them, upload your scores, and then it's a kind of a panel of Hollywood composers who are judging this competition. And the grand prize is a movie deal with Warner Brothers. I had never written anything to picture before, but I figured, this is what I wanted to do. So let me take a stab at it. So I entered the competition and I won the grand prize. And so I was able to score my first film, my first feature for Warner's, which they really loved what I did and kind of made me a quasi-resident composer. This is for Turner Classic Movies. And so I ended up scoring 4 more features for them. And then eventually realized, look, I have to be in Los Angeles because that's the epicenter of where this, with the internet tools that we have at our disposal and global communication, you can kind of be anywhere in the world, but it really does help to be where filmmakers are. It really helps to be able to be in the space with filmmakers, breathing the same air, sharing communal experience. So I had to move to LA. So moved to LA, and I've been here ever since. And I've just been scoring more films. I got the Sundance Film Scoring Fellowship in 2008. Started doing more independent films and documentaries, and then started doing more sort of studio stuff, a lot more television around 2015, 2016. And yeah, brings us to present
Awesome.
day.
Awesome. Pause there. My sister is locked out.
Oh, okay.
Pause it. Hold on. Pause the
Sure.
recording. So now that you have
Yeah.
been in Los Angeles since that fantastic opportunity to work with Turner Classic Movies and
Which
working
is
with
based in
Warner,
Atlanta, by
right, it
the
was based in Atlanta.
way.
That
Across
Atlanta
the
connection
street,
is still there.
across the street from, yeah, from Georgia Tech. What's interesting is in 2002, legendary composer Elmer Bernstein heard my score, the first score that I did for Turner Classic Movies, and contacted Turner Classic Movies to say who wrote this, who is this, and they made the introduction, and he was surprised that a 26-year-old guy who had never written a film score before wrote this thing. And they ended up flying me out to Atlanta, and we did a series of appearances together. It was sort of like the old generation, and here's the new generation coming in of film composers. Um, they were doing a whole month of classic films that Elmer Bernstein had scored, from To Kill a Mockingbird, Magnificent Seven, all the classic films that he scored, um, including all of like the Scorsese films and stuff. And he was sort of like a guest programmer, and so I got to do appearances with him in Atlanta at the TCM headquarters, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, another kind of crazy Atlanta connection.
When things are supposed to happen.
And there was a crazy dinner we had this one night where we were at the Blue Point restaurant. Is that it was like
I haven't heard of that
restaurant in
before.
Atlanta. Anyway, and it was me and Elmer Bernstein, Turner, and then we saw, so Elton John was in the restaurant, and Elton and Elmer Bernstein knew each other from, I don't know, Lion King or something. And so he comes over, and now I'm having dinner with, I mean, Elton didn't actually have dinner with us. He sort of sat down for a few minutes and chatted. Um, Great handshake, by the way. I didn't know what to say to him. Like, what do you say to Elton John? Like,
Right.
oh, I like your music. What do you say?
You're
So
amazing.
I, so I didn't really say much to him, because, like, what does one say, right? So, but he and Elmer were talking quite a lot. I just remember he had a really great handshake.
That is so
So
cool. I mean, that and those of you who are listening, I mean, please know that when something is supposed to happen for you, it will find its way to you, and that's certainly the story that we're hearing on this particular episode. So that now that you are firmly, you're placed in film scoring, this is what you do. What dictates your decision to say yes to a project?
that is a great question. So upon moving to LA, one of the things that um so I moved down here with my girlfriend, who is my wife now, and one of the things that we talked about early on was how I don't I don't want um I don't want money to be an obstacle towards taking a job, and I don't want to do something for the money. So um um what determines whether I take a job is if I like the artist and I like the work, if I feel like it's contributing to the greater good in some way. I do have certain things, like I don't like, I don't want to work on any project that glorifies violence, for example. Um, there's certain things that I've been actually quite lucky that there have been very few projects that have come that I've intersected with where I had some like objection to the project. I scored a horror film last year. I don't really like horror films. I don't watch them. But this one was kind of unusual, and there was some social commentary that I thought was, I like Jordan Peele's films and their horror films, and usually because there's like a social comment that he's making. He's using the horror genre almost like as a means to transmit the message that he's trying to communicate. And I felt like this film was doing a similar thing. Um, there've been a couple of other films that I've had some a questionable relationship with that I ended up not taking. But for the most part, I've been very lucky that the filmmakers that I've been working with, I score a lot of documentaries that are often that have some kind of relevance to things that are happening in the world. Um, I've I scored a number of films that sort of challenge a lot of the assumptions of war and war making, and militarism and economic exploitation and various other things. So I guess maybe it's sort of like the kinds of work that land on your plate are associated with the people that you know and the world, the in the Venn diagram of like the different things I'm interested in, there's gonna be some overlap, right, in the circles. And so yeah. So I've been pretty lucky that a lot of the projects that have come my way or that I've been able to audition for are things that are genuinely that resonate for me in some way. And if they don't, um, I usually, yeah, there'd have to be some other really compelling reason, like maybe I really like the filmmaker, or even though I'm not something about the project doesn't resonate for me. Um, but yeah, I guess it's kind of a complicated calculation. But I do try to not have it be about the money, and I try to not be cynical about it.
Gotcha. So as you're thinking of the projects that you're working on, would you take us through the day of your work day? What's it like to go through waking up? You were in the middle of a project. What is the moment by moment path that you take in your work life?
Okay, so there's a lot of anxiety. there's a lot of there's a lot of like, I have to say, you're gonna think I'm making a joke, but I'm dead serious. Whenever I start a project, it always starts with me having a panic attack. It doesn't matter, even if it's I mentioned, I think I might have mentioned, I did mention that um I've scored at like 124 episodes of the Tom and Jerry show, the cartoon with Cat and the Mouse. Um, Even on episode number 124, I'd done 123 of them. Starting the project, I had the same panic attack. And it's this like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't know how to do this. Why did I take this job? I should have listened to my mother and gone to medical school. Why did I do, like it doesn't matter. I always, because the blank page is terrifying. And what do I write? What do I do? I don't know. And what once I have to get over this anxiety hurdle, and usually it means that I've picked up a guitar or I've sat at the piano and I've come up with some cogent musical idea. Maybe it's a melody, something that I can be like, okay, this doesn't suck. Okay, now let me go somewhere with, it's just a matter of doing the work. I think I have a lot of anxiety when I'm not doing the work. When I'm actually in the studio working, somehow there's something that, I guess because I'm focused on the work and not everything else, it allows me to get past that barrier. But you know, I end up having to work very, very long hours. It's not uncommon for me to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I'm really under the gun, it might be, it's like when I was working on the Tom and Jerry show, for example, an easy week was about 80 hours of work and a hard week was about 140. And that was the range. There weren't that many 140 weeks. There were a handful, but that was the range. And 80 hours was an easy week. And um, it's just not sustainable. You're going to get burned out. It's not going to be good for your health. So, um, you know, typically, um, in the morning, so I have two dogs, and these are like real dogs. They require exercise and they've got a lot of energy. So I take them for a pretty good walk in the morning, and that gets me going. I'll eat breakfast, come to work, and usually they're not here right now, but usually they're here with me in the studio. They're just always working, always not working, they're sleeping usually. I'm working, they're sleeping. And come early afternoon, they'll start nudging me. They'll put their nose up against me, like, hey, let's do something. And it's like, oh yeah, right. I gotta eat. So eat something, maybe take them for another quick walk, come back to the studio, work a few more hours. This pattern will continue till midnight, 2 in the morning, try to get as much sleep as I can, get up in the morning, and then go again. So it's pretty relentless. Now that's when I'm writing, which is the vast majority of what I'm doing. When I have recording sessions, it tends to be more frantic and panicked, but also more fun. Because, well, everything that I play myself, so I play drums, piano, guitar, bass. I'll do that here in this room usually. In fact, my drums are set up right there. I don't know if you can see them. Um, all the instruments are kind of set up and mic'd up, the piano room. But when I'm recording, if I'm conducting an orchestra, or like if I'm recording strings, brass, woodwinds, then there's a lot of like music preparation that I have to do. So I end up with like pages and pages of stuff like this. Um, um, Hundreds of pages of music that I have to print and proofread, and I'll usually have my assistant like proofread. She goes through all my charts, and this she's a musician that I collaborate with on a lot of stuff, and she's fantastic. She checks all my charts and helps with all the prep, and then the recording is fun because I'm actually engaging with other human beings. I'm not in isolation, for hours and hours and hours. And it's always fun because musicians that are not me bring something else. Even if they're just reading the ink that's on the page, everyone's got a slightly different vibrato. They have a different way of phrasing and thinking, and every human being, they're bringing some element of themselves to the score. And it's always better than what I was hearing in my head. So those are magical moments for me, that I really look forward to, but they're also extremely stressful because we're on the clock, and um, and there's always a looming deadline. Deadlines are stressful, but they're also very good motivating factors. So yeah, the deadline is the enemy. The time is the enemy, really, more than anything else. And so that's kind of what I'm realizing as I've just described to you. You asked me, what does a day look like? I just
Or even a
described to
week.
you,
This is great because who
and
would
it's
have
kind of
known? The people are listening, like, wow, this is what it takes.
it's kind of like, doesn't sound very glamorous, and also sounds a little depressing, doesn't it? But
Sounds like work.
yeah, yeah. Well, I got to tell you, the thing is, the work sometimes can be a drag, but the work is writing music, is like creating music. Now, that puts me in a very, very fortunate situation where, it's very hard to find people to pay you to write music. I actually have people paying me to write music. Like, how amazing is that? I am not in a position to be complaining at all. Um, my entire life, I wanted to write music for a living and create music, and I actually am able to do that now, which is, really an amazing privilege and gift. And if I sound like I'm not enthusiastic about that, then I'm not representing accurately what my feeling is about this, which is that I'm probably one of the top 1% of luckiest people on the planet, that I actually get to do this thing that really feeds my soul. As stressful as it is with the deadlines and the not getting enough sleep and so on, that's sort of just the nature of the job.
And this is exactly what needs to be said, because there are people who want to work in spaces like you. And for you to be very candid about this is the life. I mean, you see the
Yeah.
glory when you're able to view projects on streaming services, but this is what it takes to get to that and to enjoy this. So this is exactly what we need to hear. And I wasn't feeling anything. I was intrigued, like, wow, this is a lot. This is certainly more than I thought it was. And for you to just share that, it's so important. And I thank you for sharing it so far.
Yeah, it's the thing is, it's you can't miss a deadline. If you miss a deadline, you pretty much don't work again. Like, it's pretty, like, that's um there's so much riding on these projects, and sadly, so most often with when you're writing music for a film, the music is the last thing that happens in the process, or it's one of the last things along with like color correction of the film, but it's like it's in the process unless you're involved early on, like with the script, which sometimes happens. And I love that situation where the filmmaker knows they want to hire me early on. They send me a script. I'm already thinking about the characters and the situations they're experiencing, and coming up with musical ideas. And I'm sending these ideas to the director, and that's a different situation. But most often I come in towards the end. At that point, they're the film production, they're out of money, they're over budget, they're out of time, they're you know this is like crunch mode, and it's panic mode for everyone. And so any buffer that was in the schedule has thoroughly been exhausted at this point. So if I miss the deadline, and the theatrical release date has already been announced, or the streaming date has been announced, or the television broadcast, heads are going to roll. Like I can't be late. If I need an extra 3 days to get this thing done, that's basically career terminating. So that's one of the reasons why it's so stressful, is that there is no buffer. And in my case, it's particularly stressful because I don't, increasingly, one of the things you'll find is music production is done by a team of people, where if somebody gets sick or somebody quits or whatever, it's like a corporation where, so like very often you'll see, like, so Hans Zimmer is one of the big composers in Hollywood, and you'll see, music by Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer is like the brand. He's a guy, but he doesn't really do any of the writing. He's got a team in the same way that, like, you think of Apple computers, like, okay, Steve Jobs, or I guess now it's Tim Cook, but Steve Jobs, nobody thought he was actually writing lines of code or doing board layout. He was like an idea guy, and he had a huge team of people to actually execute his ideas. That happens very much in film scoring, where you've got music by, and there's the named composer, but the people who are actually doing the writing is a huge team of people. Now it depends. Like with John Williams, John is actually doing the writing because he's like a legit composer. But increasingly, what you're finding is you have teams of people. In my case, I have me. I don't have a team of people. It's all me. I'm writing everything. I'm doing all my own orchestration. I do all the engineering, the recording, the mixing, everything myself. And so it's that much more stressful because, if something happens, like it's on me. And I've had things like, in 2018, I had an accident where I shattered the fingers of my left hand, and I had to get surgery to get my hand rebuilt, and they thought I was never gonna be able to use my hand again. And it was a very traumatic event. I didn't miss a single deadline. I basically worked through it. I hired other people to play my parts, and never missed a deadline because I knew that wasn't an option. Last year, I got really sick. And again, missing the deadline was not an option. So I just had to work through it, and it was brutal. Which tells me that this is a problem I need to solve. I need to, like, figure out I've never had, I don't really know how to delegate. And I'm also very particular about, like, my orchestration and how the writing. I don't even know how I would offload some of this work to someone else. Plus, I also feel like it would be unethical to then say that I wrote it. Like, I would want the other person to get credit for it. And that becomes very tricky with the way credits are happening and stuff. I've done a lot of ghostwriting for other composers where it's not my name on it, even though I wrote it. And there's that's another secret that is not so secret in Hollywood, but maybe outside of Hollywood, it's not well known, but a lot of the people whose name is on the music didn't actually do the writing. There's a lot of ghostwriting, and there's a lot of dishonesty and book cooking. And a lot of exploiting um, of younger composers who are just trying to make ends meet and make a name for themselves, and they'll do a lot of writing for free or no credit, that sort of thing. And I feel like that's incredibly abusive and dishonest, since I wouldn't want to bring someone on and then not like celebrate what they've done with their name on it. So it's something I got to figure out. But yeah, it can be stressful. I'm getting stressed out just thinking about it. But
Well, let me ask you, because we're about to go into another segment where it's
okay.
much more easy questions, but two more in this area of the work. Since you are one of one
Yes.
at this present time, are there particular tools that you need to do your work, or if they're let's say a collegiate student that's listening and they're wanting to get their family to invest in tools to help them along their journey of becoming a music composer like yourself, are there tools that you could share that you use that could be beneficial to their toolbox?
Yeah, so it's kind of the same stuff that everyone uses. So the most important tool is your brain, followed by your ears. um so there's that, like, and I it sounds like I'm being glib, but but I mean that seriously. Like, it's very easy to fetishize gear and equipment and get caught up in how cool the tools are, but ultimately, if you're good at your craft, you can, you know, um, it's sort of like, among doctors, among surgeons, like anybody in a really well equipped hospital can take out an appendix. The question is, if you're in the middle of the Mekong Delta on a boat and you got a spool of duct tape and a plastic fork, and someone has appendicitis, can you take out this person's appendix safely in this environment, right? Like, that's the real test. So um the the key is really to have your ears and your brain like attuned. um Now, to answer your question a little more directly, digital audio workstations are kind of the bread and butter of the modern composer. So it's a computer with software, and you have to know how to use that. And it's crucially important that you be very familiar with this tool and know how to create music effectively. Like, um, what I mean by that is that, um, when you're using computers to create music, it can sound artificial and it can sound plastic and very demo-y, not very polished and final. And increasingly, filmmakers, people in general, want to hear a finished product, even if it's just a demo, because they're not used to um, hearing what a demo sounds like. They don't know necessarily, okay, these really cheesy sounding strings are going to be a live string section, so just use your imagination. They don't know how to do that. They're just going to react viscerally to what they're hearing. So you have to be able to execute with extreme precision and high quality whatever musical ideas you're hearing in your head, using the software and the hardware that you have. And that's something that takes practice, and it's a skill that you acquire over time. So that's the main advice I would give to someone who's getting into this, is to really learn your digital audio workstation, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of different pieces of software that different people use, but learn how to do it well. Learn how to use it musically. um I think it's also important to listen to as much stuff as you can, and a range of stuff, and not just film music, but like stuff from all over the world. There's inspiring stuff all over in fact, especially not in the US, where, not that, I mean, like, there's great music, of course, obviously in the US, but there's like really interesting stuff happening outside of our little microcosm, whatever it happens to be, that can be very inspiring and that can really broaden your musical vocabulary. Um, and it's always exciting when I hear something that I haven't heard before, or an amalgam of things. Maybe I've heard the individual components, but not in that particular combination. Um, it can be really thrilling. Um, So yeah, the tools are sort of the standard toolkit that musicians use now, which, most musicians, we're all kind of computer based these days, and it's not so much the tools as knowing how to use them. I mean, a computer and the software, these are basically glorified screwdrivers and hammers, and I mean, they're tools. So what makes someone a master carpenter is not that they have particular tools, although it helps, but it's that they know how to use them really well. Um, and so I would say don't get caught up in the tools, in what they are. Like, whatever your budget is, whatever you can afford, there's a lot of mileage you can get out of, you know, even really, really basic, entry level stuff.
Excellent. I'll take that to heart. Use what you got to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories of like amazing albums that were made with, frankly, very entry level, inexpensive equipment. Um, um, I remember the Lisa Loeb record that came out in 1994, which sounds fantastic. She had one mic that's like a $400 mic, and like they just didn't have she didn't have a lot of resources, but they were just very good at using whatever tools they had to create something that was really compelling. Um, I guess another way to say it is don't let the tools that you're able to have access to, don't let that be an obstacle. Um, yeah,
That's good. That's good. Thank you for sharing that. That was encouraging too, to don't just be caught up in this high expensive piece of tool if that's not what you need. Use what you
yeah.
got.
I mean, it's just also like the technology is improving such that, um, frankly, um, if you've got a computer and $1,000, you can you can do a lot with that. Um, this wasn't the case maybe 20 years ago, but today the tools have become sufficiently democratized that the barriers to entry are pretty low. The really entry level gear is actually pretty good relative to what it was, say, 20, 30 years ago.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, we're coming to the segment that we ask some quick questions. Is more
Okay.
that to for us to get to know who you are as an artist. And some of
Okay.
them are going to be short answers. Some of them going to be like, "Huh, you asked that," but I'm going to ask them. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
All right. So, first question. Well, you already answered that. I usually ask artists dogs or cats, but you already have two dogs, so we know that that's going to
Dogs.
be
Yeah. I
dogs.
like cats too, I suppose. I just only have a lot of experience with them, but I like all animals.
Window or aisle seat?
Window. I like to sleep and I can lean up against it.
What book would you give as a gift?
Oh.
It's one of those questions.
So it depends on who I'm giving it to. Um, I have to say Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent really changed my life. Um, um, who someone I think is a beautiful writer, Arundhati Roy, the Indian writer. Her prose is gorgeous. I would give The God of Small Things, which is a book she wrote in the late 90s. I would give that as a gift to people. It depends on who I'm giving it to. It depends on who they are, what their interests are, you know. So maybe those are a couple of options.
Right, that best represents you. And
Oh, that
what
represents me.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was her name again?
Arundhati Roy, Arundhati Roy. She wrote The God of Small Things. I want to say it was like 99, maybe. She won the Booker Prize for that. Um, yeah, her prose is just beautiful.
Wonderful. What movie can you not resist watching if it came on right now?
Um, The Godfather, either part one or part two. Not so much part three, but one or two.
Yeah, that's what the general consensus is.
A lot of people give you that answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
One or two. I've heard that before. Not
Yeah. The
many,
Shawshank
but one or
Redemption's pretty
two.
good too. That's another one, but yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Godfather.
Okay. What is your favorite recipe to cook or eat?
Oh, these are great questions.
Thank you.
So there's a I'm gonna tell you one that I've been experimenting with lately, and it's one that I found just on the internet. I think I forget what website it was, but it's a soft tofu that you marinate. It's kind of an Asian dish. You marinate in a it's a soy um sesame kind of glaze that you make with green onions, and it's just got a few different ingredients. And it's you basically it takes a while to prepare it, but then once it's prepared, you just put it in the refrigerator. You don't cook it. You let it chill for about an hour, and then it's just great. It's really invigorating, and yeah. So it's like a chilled tofu scallion dish.
Okay. It sounds like something that could be available at Whole Foods. Yeah,
Maybe.
maybe.
I don't know. I don't really go to their deli section very often, so I don't know, but maybe.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah.
What makes you laugh the most?
Absurd things and incongruent things.
That's good to know with the project that I told you about. So
Okay.
definitely have some scenes that go
Yeah.
along with that answer. That's great
Okay.
to know. What would be your theme song or your cell phone entrance song?
Ooh. Um, I'm gonna say "Pick Up the Pieces" by Average White Band. Boo-doo-da-da, boot-ba-da, ba-da-doo-da, ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
is that obvious? Maybe I'll give you a less obvious answer. That's a good one though.
That's a good
Um,
song.
okay, I'm gonna let's go with that.
Let's stick with that answer. Okay.
Oh, you know what? Actually, what's good? Um, or maybe a Nile Rodgers production. Okay, let's just go. Let's go with Average White Band. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could choose one superpower, what would it be?
Do over. So like something happens, I could hit pause and like rewind 30 seconds and do it again. Like it's like basically to fix mistakes, or I said something stupid, or I don't know. So yeah, I want to be do over man. So that's basically allows me to rewind the tape and like do it again.
You know, there's a movie, We Can Be Heroes, and one of the characters is Rewind. He's a
Oh,
twin of Fast Forward. My daughter watches this all the time. The
oh,
people,
is that a
people have,
cartoon? What is that?
yeah. So it's We Can Be Heroes, and they're twins. Rewind and fast forward, and he can go back
Oh,
like 10 seconds and fix whatever mistake that just happened.
okay. So that yeah, I think of it as do over.
But I like the Do Over Man. This is a new character that needs to star in his own DC movie since you work with Warner Brothers. Yes,
Yeah,
Mr. Do Over Man. Let's go. Here's the next question.
yeah.
Who is your favorite person to follow on social media?
Um, great question. I like okay, so Brianna Joy Gray is fantastic. Um, she's a journalist, um, and a communications person. Um, she's yeah, Brianna Joy Gray would be my first answer. There's a um yeah, okay. There are other things I could say, but you asked for one, so that I'm gonna say that Brianna Joy Gray.
All
She's
right,
great.
awesome.
Yeah, you should check her
If,
out.
if you could offer yourself one piece of advice, well, yourself as your younger high school graduate self, what would it be?
Um, Practice more and really work on your singing chops. like develop, like be a good singer. I got to tell you, okay, here's the thing. As a musician, I just can't, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be able to sing well for a variety of reasons. One, it's a good way to communicate to other musicians, to other people, like how a tune goes or what you're hearing. But also, if you're playing in bands, it's so useful if whoever, whatever musician, the bass player, the cellist, whatever, if they can sing, you can give them harmony parts. There's all kinds of opportunities that open up. I can tell you there are a lot of like mediocre not mediocre, but decent, competent drummers who got the gig because they can sing, not because they were a better drummer than the other guy or the other people who were auditioning. Um, it just comes in handy so often. And also, the human voice is like the most evocative instrument that exists to other humans. I think because we're humans, and that's, you
Mhm.
know,
We can connect through
it's
the
how we
voice.
connect. It's
Hmm.
um and if you can use your voice, if you have good control over your voice, and you don't even have to have like a great instrument. I mean, there are really good singers who have terrible. I think Rod Stewart has a terrible instrument, but he's a but he's a good singer. You
Hmm.
know, um, I think yeah. If you can sing well, that's extremely valuable. So that's what I would tell myself is work on your singing, and also just like really practice. Yeah.
Practice of what you really love to do. I feel that.
Yeah. Again, you can't, there's no such thing as being too good at your instrument. Um, it just really it's very important. Yeah.
Good. And we're coming to the last segment. This is all
Okay.
about the future.
Okay.
We know that you have a current project on Max, Tom and Jerry, but is there a particular project that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, there's a Nepalese movie that I'm going to be scoring called The Sky Is Mine. It's the third. So I signed I've been I did a couple of films with the same director that I met through Danny Glover, who I've been doing for the last few years. I've been scoring a number of films with his company, Louverture Films. And Danny Glover introduced me to this guy, this director, and he and his collaborator named Jocelyn Barnes. And this is going to be the third film in the series that I'm doing with the same director. He's a fantastic director, so I'm really looking forward to that. And um, there's one other thing, but I can't really talk about it yet because it hasn't been announced. But The Sky's Mine is definitely something I'm looking forward to.
And as you have already achieved great success, you're a four-time Emmy Award winning music composer. What else is your goal? What are you looking forward to doing?
So I've been doing a bit more teaching. Last fall, I was a composer in residence at Columbia College in Chicago, and I taught second year master's students in film scoring and also fourth year undergrads in advanced composition. And it was so last year I scored three feature films. So I had two Warner Brothers features, Lionsgate feature. Um, Went to Europe and played with one of the bands that I play with. We we played in Europe and did a European tour, and that was so much fun. But my favorite thing that I did all year was teaching these college students and in the graduate school. And I came to realize that this is something that I didn't even know that I would enjoy or be good at or like or have any kind of resonance with. And I came to realize that this may be something that I want to do more of. And so I've been doing a lot of guest lecturing um, at USC, at Tufts University, the University of North Carolina, and um, I've got another guest lecture coming up at another university, and so I'm interested in um, in teaching at the university level, and so that's something that I would like to invite more of into my life. And I feel like it's a way that I can help other composers who are starting out. And it's just so enjoyable. And I just love the students. I just love working with them. And I have to say, I'm very, very inspired by young people. Um, I have to say, in so many ways, their creativity, their openness, their enthusiasm, their willingness to challenge orthodoxies, um, and their eagerness to make a better world is very inspiring. And it's almost like that's one of the main motivators for me. Is like I want to be around them and I want to help. So yeah.
A lot of times when someone encounters someone who is on the journey themselves, it's like an interchange of energy. That person is sharing their hopes and dreams, and you can see something in somebody and offer some word to help them along that journey. So it's a blessing to hear that you want to share your path and help that person along their way. I mean, it just means that you're going to be blessed yourself, because it's such an awesome thing to want to help somebody in that regard. So fantastic. And to hear about your journey with great teachers and your path, you know how essential they can be to your life. So that's great. And
Yeah.
a couple more questions for you. What did you enjoy most about today?
Um, so I like so one there's going to be a few things. One is I like this this period of questioning because it's getting me to think outside of my common patterns of thinking. So this section of this interview, I I met up with randomly. I happened to meet up with some people that I've been wanting to connect to um for a while. I just ran into them earlier today, and that was a nice conversation. Well, this day is still unfolding, so I don't know what's going to come. But thus far, I would say that these 2 points. So talking to you and these particular questions that you've devised has been really fun. And then yeah, running into these people earlier today.
Great. Thank you so much. And would you like to give some shout outs to loved ones who have been supportive of you on your journey? This is the love on me, thank you section.
Yeah, it's um right. I'd like to thank the Academy for this great honor.
Get
No.
that practice speech in.
um it is true that I've I've been very lucky to have had people that inspire me and people who've challenged me, um, and people who taught me things even after the teaching ostensibly concluded. Like I'll revisit conversations that I've had with mentors and teachers frequently, and I feel like I still learn things from revisiting those conversations. Um, yeah, music teachers that I've had. Um, yeah, I um mentors, and yeah, there's just a lot of people that I feel lucky to have intersected with at various points in my life. um wow, so you're getting me to think about all kinds of stuff that I don't normally
Yes,
think
I
about in
told
a
you
way
that I
that's
had a
really
different layout of a show.
yeah. I don't normally, I don't really talk about myself very much because it's not interesting. And
You
you're
and
asking
all of
me.
the artists that I've talked to, that it's the same response. Like, I just don't normally think of myself like that. Let me sit. But you should. I mean, you have had a journey. And you should, it's time to share it. I mean, you're in an
Okay.
awesome space.
Yeah. It's interesting. We're having this conversation 2 days before Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is a time when I like to reflect on um it's I like to reflect on how appreciative I am of my relatively good fortune. Um and it's a difficult topic for me because I also feel very guilty. Um because I feel like a lot of my good fortune, my privilege, whatever, is unearned. Um and it's something that I no, it's seriously, I mean, it's like, so for example, I live in Los Angeles, for example, and we have a very large unhoused population, as you probably know. Um, I live on the west side. Um, I-405 is right over here, um, maybe a mile away. And there's a overpass where there's dozens uh, of people sleeping under the bridge. And every so often sometimes I'll walk by, I'll be riding my bicycle by, and I'll sometimes chat with some of the people who are sleeping there. And there's this guy that I see every so often. And um, when I think about it, like the difference between me and him is that I'm very lucky and he's not. Now, there are obviously other differences, but the salient difference, the difference between me and him is that I'm I'm very lucky and he's not as lucky as I am, which is why I sleep in a comfortable bed in a nice house and he's huddled under a blanket under a bridge. And it's important for me to recognize that. And I don't know how to feel about that because it just it like I said, it feels like my privilege is unearned. A lot of the rand, those dice were rolled before I was born, in a sense. Um, and so as we're approaching Thanksgiving, like these are all things that I like to think about, and you're asking questions that are also making me think about it as well. Um, yeah.
So let
Uh,
me just remind you that you had the mental aptitude to enter a school like Georgia Tech. You had the decision to say, I'm going to take up this opportunity to explore a career, move across country, work there, but yet and still listen to a part of yourself that said, hey, I want to really go down the path of music. You were the person that made the decision to enter that contest, and you were the best person for that because you received that honor of working where you worked, and you were the person that decided to enter into the Sundance. You were chosen for that. So a lot of this is you. You have made these decisions. So sometimes it's not just luck. It's that you were the best person for that time. And I honor you and recognize you for the path that you have taken and for following your heart to lead you to where you are today. Because, like you said, going from your childhood, your parents had their ideals and their values, but you listened to the God in you to lead you to where you are. And yes, there are people who are experiencing some challenges, and we can have the ability to help these individuals who need it the
yeah.
best way we can. But you, sir, have made some decisions that have been right in alignment with where you need to be. So I recognize you.
Well, thank you for saying that. You're very kind.
It's true. It's true. And the last question before we go,
Yeah.
how can people learn more about you or follow you on social media channels?
Yeah, I mean, I have all the social media accounts. I'm not super active on social media. Um, I every so often it is such a time sink if you start to actually like live in that space. Um, you know, so I try to limit it to like no more than 5 minutes a day. Because otherwise, like I'll never get anything done. But yeah, I have a Twitter account. I have a I have an Instagram account. I think I've only ever posted a handful of things, but I should probably post more things. Um, and I have a Facebook account. Yeah, kind of all the usual places.
And if you're listening, look in the show notes. We're going to add all of the ways you can connect to him and
Okay.
follow him. So there'll be people who you'll have some new followers, even though you don't be on social media like that. But that's okay. You'll have some new fans.
Yeah, and actually I do I really do need to sort of get more on that. It's something that I would like to do. By the way, just parenthetically, for the last couple of years I've been writing a column for Stereo Gum where I they have me basically talk about new pop music that's coming out from the perspective of a composer and producer, where I try to like explain what's happening with the music in a way that can resonate for a general audience. Um, I'm working on the next article right now, which I'm excited about. But if you go to Stereo Gum, the column is called In Theory, and it's I think it's a lot of fun. I enjoy writing it, so it's one of the things I've been doing, and wanted to just mention that.
And that link is also posted in show notes.
Okay,
You'll post it there.
okay, I'll send you the link.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we
Okay.
have come to the end of the spotlight for today's artist. If this podcast has helped you, please share. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Dream of Drea across all social media platforms. And my name is Drea of Dream of Drea, a company with a mission to inspire, inform, and involve audiences through transcendent storytelling and integrative art. Remember, wherever you are, right now is the perfect time to act on your dreams. Thanks again for you joining us and sharing your path. And we will touch bases with you all next time. Until then, keep dreaming, y'all.